A thought snack. What is virtue signaling? This term gets thrown around a lot on social media, and I think it's worth looking at for a moment. In my mind, virtue signaling is an error of intent rather than a specific activity. It's not as much about what you're doing as it is why you're doing it. It's an action that someone does to advance his or her face value. It's about getting approval from others, and the others in this case are the cool kids of culture and society. Those who virtue signal are making a public statement either to get into the good graces of a group or avoid falling out of the group that they are already in. Either way, the signal is aligned with a particular group's definition of what that group considers virtuous. In other words, it's making sure the cool kids know that you like the things that they like and hate the things that they hate. Or it can be asserting and verifying your status as one of the cool kids. Either way, it shows that you have adopted the cool kids' morality. You're showing that you're moral too, not because you actually have integrity, but because your morality matches theirs and your value system is aligned with theirs. Virtue signaling is usually engaged in by someone whose virtue status is in question or could be in question because of who they are and their established identity, like being a white male. The virtue signal is to accept another person's morality on the basis of something like quid pro quo. I accept your morality, so you will accept me. But virtue signaling can be performed by those who need to establish virtue or intersectional credit. In many cases, I think celebrities fall into this category. Celebs seem to virtue signal for two main reasons. First, they have a platform of fame and a large group of followers who believe that this celeb is a good person. These fans want to see the celeb be that good person and live up to their expectations. Second, celebs are usually known for being authors, singers, actors, or performers. They're not necessarily known for or by their politics. So political issues provide a great opportunity for them to sound off on something they may not get asked about a lot or speak about something that's not within their usual sphere of topics. This gives them the chance to prove themselves righteous to their younger and more left-leaning fans and the world at large. So let's consider a few examples of what virtue signaling is or isn't, in my opinion, because this isn't an exact science. For example, if a lesbian woman goes to a feminist march decrying Donald Trump, she's not really virtue signaling. She's already a virtuous cool kid, and she's just doing what she always does as part of her virtuous lifestyle and identity. Her morals are correctly aligned with progressivism. She is free from the original sin of intersectional privilege, and she's probably not in danger of losing her virtue status. Conversely, a white male, especially one who could be identified as sometime Christian or Republican, who attends such a feminist march to stand in solidarity or reviles Trump on social media or something of that nature, he's much more likely to be virtue signaling. These actions come from the desire to let everyone know he's really a good guy in spite of his non-virtuous white cishet identity and his original sin of intersectional privilege. Any of the elements of being white, Republican, or Christian definitely keep him out of the cool kids club, or they make it harder for him to get into it. He's white, his intersectional virtue is questionable by default. Thus, he stands to gain much more from virtue signaling or sending a message of his goodness and wonderful humanity in the era of Donald Trump, and much more to lose by being part of the increasingly bad racist white patriarchy. As new issues arise, those with more privilege in the intersectional caste system, in other words, those who are lower on the caste chain, they have to quickly and loudly take a side on the issue to again prove their nobility is greater than or equal to their privilege. Such a virtue signaling white male has to continue this action. He has to keep playing the game. He must demonstrate that in spite of his privilege or status that he is not a monster. He must communicate that regardless of his former or current beliefs, his vote, his skin color, his gender or sexuality, that he is aware, caring, kind, compassionate, and whipped by societal expectations. This kind of behavior is not limited to white men. Women, corporations, and organizations do things to announce their goodness in some form or another all the time. J.K. Rowling strawmanning Donald Trump on Twitter or Google's firing of James Damore both seem to fit the virtue signal criteria. In a way, virtue signaling is worse than being intersectionally debased and without virtue. It's an exercise of moral exhibitionism for the sake of exhibition, not for the sake of morality. And the morality is rarely one's own. Often it's adopted not because it is a superior way to live, but because it is a superior way for one to be accepted. It's deeply narcissistic, focusing the attention on the signaler, not the issue. And it implies that others who aren't so caring are definitely bad people. It is to make sure the right people think the right things about you. It is to tacitly beg for acceptance and to do or say whatever it takes to avoid the label of hateful, racist, bigot, homophobe, misogynist, and so on. It's an effort to impress the cultural and political cool kids of society today and avoid the identity of loser, even if it means a loss of one's own authentic identity. We might even go so far as to say it is the mark of a truly insecure person. This concept of virtue signaling is tricky really for one simple reason. This is about intent. That's often very difficult to determine. The only way I see being able to identify a potential virtue signal is to look at who a person is, listen to what they say, watch who's listening, and then decide if they're making the effort to both impress and identify with the cool kids. It's like the definition of obscenity. You'll know it when you see it. To me, it's the mark of a person who needs approval from others and has been conditioned to find it at any cost. It's an act committed to avoid being singled out. I think this is a result of such a person seeing how bad the uncool crowd actually is to the regressive social justice left, and they cannot stomach being thought of as immoral by this group, a group which, by the way, has no consistent morals and has a penchant for making up sins by which they can condemn other people. Virtue signaling is narcissistic, self-benefiting, self-advertising, and self-promoting, and some of that may go with the territory of surviving in a classroom, workplace, or pop culture environment. Even so, at its heart, I think the issue is the same. It's an insecure and self-absorbed person begging for acceptance.